good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this. Welcome to the second lecture on Environmental Management 2A, and today's lecture is on water pollution. Before we start, I've had someone ask me about assessments. I have no idea how assessments are going to work. They're still under discussion. Because they're trying to figure out, should they give you a book test, should they give you one big test at the end of the year, or should they give you constant, continuous small assignments. So it's still under discussion. I don't think there has been a conclusion reached yet, but as soon as we get there, I'll let you guys know what the plan is. And then in terms of group work, we still need to figure that out because Modley has an assignment here for you guys in terms of doing a written paper in terms of the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution. So we'll get on the WhatsApp group, we'll just chat a bit because I also just want to figure out what I want to be asking you guys. But in terms of that semester test 2, I think just ignore it for you for now. And it's a very difficult term, this, obviously because we're all at home, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, at least you are guaranteed this term. You just need to keep your head down and then just work on getting a good high mark. So with that being said and done, let's continue then on to water pollution. So let's see what you're going to get yourselves into for today. So we're going to look at water pollution in general, and then from there we're going to divide it up into surface water and then groundwater pollution, and then from there we'll have a look at major pollutions in South Africa. We will then go on to marine pollution, and then lastly conclude on the management of pollution. is water pollution? It is the degradation of water quality in a manner that becomes harmful to living organisms, in which the levels of biodegradation are determined through biological, physical, and chemical criteria. In which, if we have a look at biological bacteria, we're normally looking for the number of bacteria and microbes present, but also the types of bacteria and microbes. And we also have a look at the presence of various vertebrate and invertebrate species, in which the presence of these animals or insects will serve as indicators as to the quality of the water. And then there is the physical quality of the water. So we look at the color of it. We look at how murky it is, how much sediment is floating around there. And then the odor and the taste. Does it smell like sulfur, like eggs or whatever, you know? And does it taste like blood, you know, that it's got metal, iron in it. And then there's the chemical attributes, in which we look at the potential hydrogen levels, your pH levels, and then there's also the total dissolved oxygen, your biochemical oxygen demand. And then we have a look at the severity of this degradation, and we score that based according to how far the measured value is from what is the acceptable mean point. So normally there is a standard point in which we say anything more than this will cause health issues, you know, or anything within this range will be perfect to drink. Okay, so and then from there we then make an assessment on its potential impact. And then if we have a look at the definition as given by our legislation, as given by the National Water Act of 1998, water pollution is seen as being an anthropogenic induced impact, okay, in which it occurs through the direct or indirect alteration of the physical, chemical, or biological properties of a water resource, so as to make it less fit for any beneficial purpose for which it may be reasonably expected to be useful, or be harmful or potentially harmful to the welfare, health and safety of human beings, to any aquatic or non-aquatic organism, to the resource quality, or to property. So let's just break that down a little bit. So in terms of A, less fit for any beneficial purpose, okay, so that is to imply that water resources are seen to be used as a beneficial good for anything. Even if it's polluted, it still has a use. So water may not be able to be drinkable, but it can be used for crop watering. Or for instance, it may not even be used for crop watering, but it can be used within a power station as a reticulation service, or in a mine for scouring the ground, okay? And then if we have a look at B, harmful or potentially harmful for that list there. So the first one's fairly obvious, second one as well, but in terms of non-aquatic organisms, you can see how that would work in terms of, you know, a river being poisoned, or a lake being poisoned, and well, when I say poisoned, I mean contaminated. So then So factors that influence water pollution, these originate as either a singular point source or a more spread out non-point source. So to have a look at point sources, they can be discrete and said to have a defined origin, in which they exist as pipelines carrying mining or industrial waste, or as you know, or maybe they're discharging effluent into the river system. These point sources are said to be easy to manage, since we know where they originate from, and so therefore we can treat pollutants on site before they are discharged into the water system. Non-point sources are a little bit harder though, because they're diffuse and they happen sporadically, and it's often as a result, you know, it often impacts both surface water and groundwater. And these are determined by factors such as how is the land being used, what is the climate doing, what is the hydrology within the area, and it's also dependent on the vegetation cover and also the geology, how fast a given substance will permeate through the soil profile before it gets into our groundwater, so it's, or is there a layer of hard rock there that might actually prevent that from happening? So yeah, so these cannot be as easily controlled because so many different factors involved, and also there could be issues that don't even relate to the country. So for instance, it could derive as acid rain caused by pollution in another country. Other pollutant sources are mostly as a result of agricultural activities, and agricultural activities generally only produce non-point sources in a sense, especially through the uses of pesticides and herbicides, which create chemical pollution, and then also incorrect tilling practices. Let's just change that. In which they plow through their land during the wrong time of year, or they overplow their land, and this erodes the soil and causes sedimentation, in which there is then rain that occurs, and all that rain brings down that loose topsoil into the rivers, and then that creates sedimentation within our dams and waterways. And then we also have waste discharge or disposal in the form of both point and non-point sources, which affects our groundwater resources. And then this is in the form of a municipal pipeline discharging effluent into the wetland. So while this is a surface discharge, as time goes on, that effluent will seep into the groundwater. Same goes for a waste slimers dam. For anyone who hasn't seen the top of a mine dump, there's water on top of it. That's normally why the mine dump has been constructed, not so much for the disposed soil, but to store the wastewater on top. So yeah, and that wastewater is incredibly toxic because it has brought up with it all sorts of heavy metals and from underground. Especially in terms of when we have to consider the severity or the duration of a given impact. So this is in terms of the reservoir size and its type, in terms of it being a dam, a lake, or an aquifer. And then we also have to consider the residence time of that water. So for instance, water will stay in an aquifer far longer than in a river. Obviously a river that is flowing would probably completely change its water over the course of 2 weeks, whereas water will stay in an aquifer for hundreds and thousands of years, if not near millions. So a one-spill pollution spill can have impacts at certain severities. So for instance, if it is in a river, it could last only 2 weeks. But if it were to get into the sediment, it then might leach into the groundwater. And so in that sense, it depends on how severe it is, and therefore, we look at the duration. Okay, and so many issues arising from water pollution mostly relate to constant and chronic processes. So constant issues in which people are often polluting into the environment, and discharging waste directly into our river systems over a prolonged period of time. I'd like to just apologize for the sound quality in the previous slides. Unfortunately, I realized I was recording on the wrong microphone. I'm sorry I won't be re-recording of those slides. I don't have a lot of time on my hands right now, but next time I'll make sure that the sound quality is up to scratch. Okay, let's continue on then with surface water pollution.
Yeah. So pollution in rivers and lakes is normally considered okay-ish because they are able to recover moderate levels of biodegradable wastes. They're able to dilute it through their flowing water, and this then breaks it down through bacterial action. However, this process cannot work if there are excessive amounts of biodegradable waste that's being discharged, and also there's a severe drought because then that reduces the amount of water. And then also, if the river has been dammed or diverted, in which once again its flow and its speed is being reduced, and or if there is perhaps an accumulation of slowly degradable or non-biodegradable pollutants present within the water. And so in this sense, lakes and dams cannot dilute pollutants as well as rivers because they often contain layers within their profile that don't mix a lot. So your top layer will have a certain density compared to your bottom layer as a result of how hot it is, as a result of how many sediments are within it. And so as a result, you will have pollution that actually kind of sits in a certain layer depending on its density. And also lakes and dams, they don't really have much of a flow rate, and this is kind of what's important in breaking down and diluting pollution. So this, as a result, makes them more vulnerable to contamination as compared to a stream or a river, because toxic contaminants would sink down to the bottom of a dam and then would, in a sense, just blanket whatever's at the bottom. And even worse, the toxic contaminants would then get into the soil and then over time release the toxins. And because they're in the soil, you will not be able to get it out for in a short time. That'll probably take years and years. But anyways, so and then you also have excuse me, biomagnification, which will then also occur, in which smaller animals will consume heavy metals, for example, like lead or mercury, and as they get consumed up the food chain, this will then get concentrated. So, for instance, a shrimp is contaminated with some, well, a shrimp colony, let's say, is. Okay, so just to have a look at surface water pollution that affects South Africa, and most of it is as a result of agricultural drainage and wash-off, in which water would then be polluted with high sediment rates that have high concentration of fertilizers or pesticides, as well as contain lots of fecal matter as a result of feedstocks from cattle. We've also then got lots of urban wash-off that takes place and as well as effluent return flows. Untreated effluent return flows, in which these would create bacteriological contamination, salts, there's oils in the water as well as microplastics, and industrial and mining discharges create pollutants within the water such as heavy metals, chemical substances, acids, and salts. And these, to the extent, have polluted our water systems to an extent that we do not yet fully know. And these sources also get into our groundwater, and this is a serious problem, especially given how water strained our country is. at the moment. We can't even project our development sustainability past the year 2025 because of the water resources, and here we are polluting them. Um, so since 1994, the government has created what is known as the River Health Program. This was done by what was then the Department of Water Affairs and Forestry. It is now the Department of Water and Sanitation and the Department of Environmental Affairs and Forestry. Okay, and the aim of the River Health Program was to monitor and develop research findings on the ecological status of South Africa's aquatic systems. So it was basically to go out and find all our rivers, and then from there establish a status figure in terms of is it endangered, is it not, is it modified, is it fine, and then go from there. So in this sense, it's sort of to evaluate the health quality for each river from source to mouth. So you can imagine what a task that actually is. And this would then be accompanied with various reports on a river status in terms of temporal and spatial dimensions. So where is the river, spatial dimension, and what is its status over time, seasonally, over the years, and that's your temporal dimension. And this then serves as a tool in terms of identifying emerging problems and also then creating reasons for why those problems, investigating reasons for why those problems are. And so to date in 2016, this river health program. Okay, so to start off with, just to quickly explain how the test is done, this is just one of the criteria that they do, but I mentioned earlier that they look at invertebrates and vertebrate animals within, to test a river's health quality. And there you can see at the top left over here, these animals are normally indicators of a healthy river because they are very sensitive to pollutants. And so as pollutants rise, their population decreases, and we'll then start seeing more hardier animals start to live within those rivers. So if you've got a really good, pristine river, you might expect to see these animals here, whereas a more affected river would then bring up these guys here. If you, however, you have a much polluted river, you are more likely to see these animals over here, these vertebrate and invertebrate species, such as leeches or crabs or bloodworms. So yeah, so these would then indicate poor quality. Now this type of test is really easy to do. You can tell anyone to do it, and so you can roll it out en masse as a volunteer program to communities, and that's sort of how we get this monitoring program done at a bit of a quicker rate. So let's just have a look. In terms of on a national status, you can see a lot of our rivers, A, B, and B, C, are mostly at the sources. They're right at the very top, at the very start of our catchments. So you can see that as they start at the top and then move their way to the ocean, they kind of get a little bit more and more affected. And then also particularly as they move past our urban areas over here, you can see that they get very affected. So for instance, if we have a look here, this area here, I hope you can see over here, if you can see my mouse, as it moves down, its quality reduces as it goes past, I think that's Port Elizabeth there, East London. Okay, so as it starts at the top here, it's fine, but then as it goes down, it gets more and more affected. Okay, so just keep that in mind in terms of anthropogenic related pollution, okay, and how affected our river systems are. Let's quickly go to the next one. And then over here we have our criteria in terms of how they were measured. And just to note, there was nothing within this category. Okay, we don't have any rivers that are unmodified and completely natural. Okay, so only 16% of our rivers exist within this category between A, B, and C. Okay, in which it's quite likely that most of them are in fact C. Okay, and then we had about 5% being between D, E, and E. Okay, and hopefully it seems that we don't have anything within F. Okay, so this is not really too important, but just as long as you understand how we monitor water pollution within our river systems, and just so that you understand how it works. Okay. Okay, so just to look at other concerns in terms of surface water, a lot of our waterways are affected by alien biota. This is especially such as aquatic flora, like the water hyacinth, which is currently suffocating the Hartbeespoort Dam, and then also alien animals, these such as fish species, which are currently outcompeting a lot of the indigenous populations within our waters. Right now, there's a big movement towards tilapia. I don't know if anyone knows of tilapia. It's a freshwater fish, and South Africa. Um, it's mostly popular in especially Central Africa, Malawi and Kenya and Tanzania, as well as the Congo, where there's lots of freshwater resources. But in South Africa, we're more focused on our coastal fish. Okay, why am I talking about fish? The reason why I'm talking about fish is because in terms of farming freshwater fish, such as tilapia, the only species we have available to us as far as government is concerned, which is legal to use, is it's called the tilapia mozambicus, and then obviously, as the name states, it comes from Mozambique. But a lot of your farmers want tilapia nilopolis, which comes from the Nile. Now, this is obviously an alien species since it comes all the way from North Africa, and it grows a lot bigger than its southern cousin, than Mozambicus. So, but now if we were to have an alien species inside our waterways that already grows bigger and outcompetes its Okay, so groundwater pollution. In terms of groundwater pollution within South Africa, we are a semi-arid country, and we are still undergoing population growth and also urbanization as a result of this population growth. And so these development pressures will continue to further add pressure and strain onto our resources, our water resources. Okay, so there are various pollutants which are reducing our water quantities through degrading its quality. Okay, dams are experiencing sedimentation in which their capacities are literally being reduced, not so much well, both in terms of quality as well as in quantity, in which dams are being inundated with sand, with sediments that are accumulating and thus reducing its depth as well as how wide it is, but also increasing the amount of turbidity within the water, so making it more cloudy, so we can't necessarily use it for drinking because there's so many nutrients within it. Okay, as dams lose water to evaporation, the concentrations of these sediments as well as other pollutants such as fertilizer salts will then become concentrated. So our dam can be at about, let's 40%, but then as it, let's say if 5% evaporates, suddenly there are higher concentrations of pollutants within that water, and so the dam is no longer necessarily 35%, it is now, let's say, 15% due to the water quality, okay, not so much the quantity. Okay, and so this then renders the dam unusable for consumption. Okay, guys, so let's have a look at pollution sources which may impact the groundwater. So let's just have a look quick. So we've got mining, in which we have point sources such as discard dumps, return water dams, ash dumps, slimes disposals, and stockpiling. So over here, this is just a picture of the Withoek tailings facilities complex. It's a massive complex, and it's about 20 kilometers in circumference. It's really big. It's out in the southeast Rand area. Anyone been to Germiston? Anyone been to Benoni? You'll see it. And you can see on top of there is water. So while this whole mine dump is meant for the disposal of mined soil, it is also used for the evaporation of underground water or slurry. So what happens is that a mine will dig underneath the soil and won't necessarily bring the ore up. via buckets, what it'll do is it'll pump the ore as a slurry. So it'll mix it with the groundwater as it's dewatering, and then it'll pump that water to a processing plant where it'll then, in a sense, filter that sludge or slurry, take the gold out, and then further process it at this TFC, this tailings facilities complex. And then you also have various other non-point sources of pollution associated with mining, these such as dewatering, underground or open cast mining. So this is an open cast mine, which you can see is filling up with water, and that water, this whole area isn't lined. So whatever's in that water in terms of pyrite, in terms of sulfuric acid, will then just seep into the groundwater. Okay, and then to continue on with the urban sector, we produce various sources of pollution such as sewage, effluent, we have sludge drying beds, we have landfills, and in terms of landfills you have these leachate dams. Okay, so if you have a look on the far side of that picture, you have that slope, and the idea is that when it rains, the water runoff will then pool into this dam. It's called a leachate dam. So the reason why it's called leachate is because within these these landfills, such as this slope over here, let me just see if I can grab the pen out. So in the slope over here, there will be a series of pipelines underground inside the dump, and the idea is that as the things within inside it begin to condense their liquids and coalesce their liquids, they will go into these pipelines that are underground, and then they will then flow into this leachate dam. So leachate in the sense that substances leach into the soil. So as this leaches into the soil, it then coalesces into these pipes under these landfills, and then come into this. And this stuff smells. It's not only a source of underground pollution, but also air pollution in terms of people living nearby. If they're downwind of this, they will have a very bad day, especially if it's a hot week. Okay, and then in terms of the urban sector, we've got other non-point sources of pollution such as stormwater, leaking sewers, and then informal housing and sanitation. And then let me just see if I can just erase that. And then in terms of the industrial sector, we've got other point sources in terms of bulk storage, solid waste storage, and abandoned sites. So over here, this is another picture I took where you can see these containers contain something perhaps toxic, we don't actually know, but they're not being stored correctly. They are outside, they're not covered, and you can also see that there's a substance coming out of that. And if this was like some sort of a hazardous material, that would escape as runoff into the water. I mean, like there's grass just right here. Who knows what will happen as a result of that? Okay, and then industrial areas are also the sites for air pollution, or severe accidents on the road, in which they might be transporting something hazardous. Okay. And then in terms of the agricultural sector, which causes a lot of our water pollution, in terms of irrigation runoff, fertilizers, pesticides, we've got manure use, in terms of concentrated livestock and over abstraction. So over here, in this picture to the left, you can see a very good example of improper tilling practices, where we now have a whole lot of soil and sand that is just running off into the river system here, and that'll then serve to introduce a whole array of nutrients into the water system, and also sedimentation in terms of blocking up and clogging up riverways and dams. And then over here on this picture, you can see that we've got all these cows over here, and they're just standing and openly polluting the stream here. Now, it's not the cows' fault that they do what they do, but it is certainly the farmer's fault in terms of not managing this correctly, in which there is certainly something he could do in order to reduce the amount. Okay, so then there's just the same slide. It's just without all the pictures, so you can just look at it nicely, not get too confused. So let's continue on. So major pollution problems in South Africa. So, if we were to look at one of the things that creates the greatest impacts in terms of water pollution, uh, we must look at the following 5 things. So that's eutrophication, nitrification, microbiological contamination, salination, and acid mine drainage. And in essence, though, um, a lot of these things are caused by very similar things. So, for instance, if we have a look at these 3, most of them are caused as a result of improper sanitation and also an introduction of nutrients within the water. And then these 2 are mostly as a result of mining activities and elevated salt levels within the water. Okay, so then Let's go on. So eutrophication refers to water levels that have elevated concentrations of nutrients within the water source, particularly nitrogen and phosphates. Okay, so the presence of these nutrients will spur the rapid growth and development of macrophytes and microflora such as algae and cyanobacteria. These then will spur microscopic organisms to bloom, and this will then deplete the amount of available oxygen level within the water. This will then suffocate larger organisms, and as these organisms die, they render the water more and more toxic. And cyanobacteria alone are toxic, and they even are so toxic as to render it unusable for irrigation, for recreation and domestic use due to health concerns. So for instance, Hartbeespoort Dam once again is one of your big examples in which it is completely polluted. You can't even swim in there without getting sick, and as you can see, you can't even use it to water your crops. So it's just a useless body of water. It's just it's an expensive waste of taxpayers' money. Okay, but that's not our problem, at least. We're just worried about eutrophication for now. So to look at the main causes of eutrophication, and these go for a lot of the other things we'll mention just now, it's mostly as a result of ineffective treatment of your sewage, and also improper provision of sanitation within your rural areas, in which you only have long drops, or effluent is just washed off into the nearby streams. Okay, and then also it's as a result of the unregulated use of domestic detergents that contain phosphates. And people, if you ask me, we have way too many detergents on our shelves, perhaps not so much now with the coronavirus, but do we really need to have a choice of 7 different soaps? We've got too much, and we tend to waste it. And then also it's as a result of improper agricultural practices in terms of overuse of fertilizers and pesticides. Okay. And then eutrophication is especially severe within large bodies of water. I've already mentioned Hartbeespoort Dam, but then there's also Rietvlei Dam. Anyone who's out in the Pretoria area, they might also know that Rietvlei Dam is incredibly polluted. There are three rivers that flow into this dam, and all 3 of them are heavily lined with farms, and all of these, of course, then will run off into the dam. Okay. So in terms of nitrification, this mostly occurs when a water is contaminated with high concentrations of nitrates. Okay, this is similar to eutrophication in that these are caused by ineffective sewage treatment, improper sanitation services, and also as a result of excessive use of fertilizers. So nitrification is actually a natural process, and that is a very important part of the nitrogen cycle. So this happens when ammonia is broken down or is oxidized by bacterial organisms. Sorry, when ammonia is created by decaying matter, which is oxidized by bacterial organisms. So if we have a look at the first phase of this, bacteria fix ammonia with gaseous nitrogen from the atmosphere. Okay. And then this then produces nitrites, which is NO2, and then another group of bacteria will then take those nitrites and then add another oxygen onto it, making nitrates. Okay, So then nitrates then cause various problems in which the breakdown of ammonia and nitrites tends to reduce the amount of oxygen. It serves as an oxygen sink, okay? And then this sudden reduction in oxygen then suffocates the fish, and then as the fish die, they then break down, creating more ammonia, which then further fuels the nitrification, okay? And then nitrification has many health issues in which consuming this water can cause various blood related diseases, okay? Okay, and then in terms of microbiological contamination, once again, this is as a result of untreated sewage and improper sanitation. But this is when water quality results present detectable levels of total coliform bacteria or fecal coliforms. Okay, and these indicators show that water has been polluted with animal or human fecal matter. Okay, and as stated, this is because of ineffective sanitary service provision and treatment of wastewater, and also then this, if you drink this then can lead to several severe health risks. Okay, in which the present in which values for TCB or FC show that there is a contamination of E. coli. Okay, and E. coli there are many strains of E. coli that are not necessarily pathogenic, but their presence is likely to point out that there may be pathogens that can cause food or waterborne diseases such as cholera or typhoid. Okay, and and if you consume a toxic strain of E. coli, you can also receive terrible abdominal cramps as well as severe diarrheal discharge, which may contain blood. Sorry for anyone who's eating. Okay. And then let's have a look at salination. So salination is as a result of high concentrations of salt, which then removes the beneficial hydrating properties of water. And so then this makes a body of water intolerable, an intolerable habitat for biota, and it can also not be used for irrigation because this might chemically burn the roots of plants or dehydrate crops. And removing salts is incredibly costly, as discussed in the previous lecture in terms of desalinization. Okay, so salination is often associated with mining or industrial processing activities, and it is measured according to total dissolved salts, in which acceptable drinking water within cities is between 150 to 400 milligrams per liter, and rainwater generally receives less than 1 milligram salts per liter, and water within a granite well might only have 30 milligrams per liter, and then in a dolomitic aquifer, salts, total dissolved salts, can present 200 to 300 milligrams per liter. Okay, and then why is this important? This is important because mines will bring up groundwater from the groundwater to the surface, which contain over 1,000 milligrams of salt, total dissolved salts per liter. Okay, and then that is sitting now on the surface and may then permeate into our drinkable groundwater, because remember there are two layers, the shallow layer and the deep layer, and the shallow layer is what has the higher water quality, the drinkable water quality. And if we now have polluted so now this is where we have acid mine drainage, okay, in which dewatered mine water, so water that has been brought down from underground, deep underground, to the surface, can contain various pollutants with it. In this case, we're looking at sulfur levels, so in which it contains SO4 in the order of 550 milligrams per liter, in which the accepted value is 250 milligrams per liter. So because of sulfur, you will then have a very strong, pungent egg smell to this water, and you will know that this is not necessarily good for you. You would not want to be drinking that water. And so then with such presence of SO4 within this water, that can create H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid, and this comes from the excavation of ore from deep underground, in which most of this ore contains pyrite. Okay, and then pyrite contains is composed of iron sulfite, which is given to you there, FeS2, which then oxidizes with water to form sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and this process is called acid rock drainage or acid mine drainage, AMD. Okay, and so these acidic conditions formed by the pyrite cause other heavy metals within the area to then become soluble within solution. So as the water becomes more acidic, it starts to dissolve the heavy metals around it, and then this then gets into our drinking water, into our river systems. So normally this is meant to be managed, but as mines close, or as mines seek to cut certain margins, they generally neglect and get into our groundwater. Sorry. Okay, marine pollution. Stay with me, guys. I know we're on 50 minutes right now, but we're almost there. Maybe take a quick little coffee break, but it's just a few more slides left, and then we are in the clear. Okay, so just stay with me. Okay, last two sections left. Okay. So oceanic pollution, ocean waters tend to help recycle the planet's fresh water through the hydrological cycle, as discussed in the previous lecture, and they influence our weather and climate. And also oceans serve to regulate the Earth's temperatures, and then they also are responsible for absorbing portions of carbon dioxide and retaining heat from the atmosphere. So further regulatory actions made by the ocean. But these are now changing as a result of anthropogenic activities. So because of anthropogenic activities, the ocean is now absorbing more carbon dioxide and is now retaining more heat. And as we know, that is not good. So then, despite the importance of the ocean, many countries use their coastlines as sites for dumping of solid wastes and discharging their effluent. So estuaries and wetlands, as well as mangrove swamps, and also your coral reefs are receiving the brunt of these pollutive inputs. And 37% of the world's population live on a coastline. So that just already shows you how under pressure these areas are. And particularly your less developed countries, which are now currently rapidly urbanizing, and they aren't able to keep up with their infrastructural upgrades. And so as a result, most of the water that goes into the ocean is likely to not be treated. Okay. So then, if we have a look at your different pollution types, it's problematic in the sense that it's not a local problem, it's an international problem. And especially for South Africa, we are straddled in between two oceans, the Atlantic and the Indian, and we have about 3,000 kilometers of coastline that we must protect. And so, yeah. And marine pollution results as from deliberate or accidental actions, whether through human or natural events. Okay, and then these then introduce pollutants into the environment. And so this can then be divided into three broad categories, namely pollution that is derived from ships, pollution that originates from the land, and also pollution may occur as a result of interactions with the atmosphere. Okay, in terms of ocean dumping, many countries dispose of their treated municipal waste into the ocean's deeper waters, where then it will break down and become less harmful. The reason why treated is inverted commas is because it's not necessarily that we are bound by law to say that it's treated, but it's likely that much of it is not. Okay, so for instance, in South Africa, we have over 60. Okay, we have 60 registered pipelines which discharge effluent along our coast. Okay, of which a third of these, so 20 of these pipelines discharge domestic effluent amounting to 66 million liters per day. That's going into our oceans, 66 million liters, and that's just domestic waste. Okay, if we have a look at the other 30, we have industrial waste amounting to about 230 million liters per day, and then the remaining portion, which is just 10 now, expels 360 million liters of mixed-use effluent per day. Mixed-use effluent means that it means just that. But it means that it's not been sorted, it's not been regulated in any sense. It's just It's just absolute waste, and 360 million liters of that. Okay, sorry for getting distracted on that point, but so if we have a look at water runoff, that causes a lot of marine pollution in the sense that it introduces a whole array of toxic substances in terms of oils, in terms of plastics. And plastics at the moment are a huge problem in the sense that they are ingested by marine animals and can also trap and ensnare them. And then also okay, and then we have the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the GPGP, which was theorized in 1970 and confirmed in 1997, in which there are two large regions of slowly rotating masses of plastic and other solid wastes, and these gyres contain plastics mostly introduced by the land masses, as well as from ships, and these plastic wastes are in all sorts of sizes. I remember I watched a documentary of it. You guys might have as well, in which people were quite surprised because they expected to see an island of plastic, but it's not. You see maybe a floating plastic basket over there, and you take a scoop of water and you see within that water sample hundreds of microplastics floating in there, and that is the problem, are these microplastics, which can range in size from a grain of rice to a speck of dust, and as they degrade, they reduce themselves to smaller and smaller sizes, and these plastics are made up of very toxic chemicals such as polychlorinated bipentyl, PCB, bisphenol A, BPA, and DDT, which affect development pathways within animals. So for instance, if you ingest this water or are exposed to this water that has BPAs or DDT, or even fish, if you're exposed to that, your generation, you could start growing weird limbs. Your generation can start growing weird limbs, two heads perhaps, or you could also have a different genital makeup. Okay, so then let's continue on. So in terms of oil pollution, crude petroleum often enters the ocean either naturally as ocean seeps, but most damagingly through human activities, both land and on sea, in which many severe oil spills have occurred due to oil tankers being downed, and they would then spill their contents. And some of your high-profile incidences include what is called the Torrey Canyon disaster, in which 120,000 tons of crude oil was spilled into the UK western coast in 1967. And then 1989 saw the spillage of 30,000 tons of oil into the pristine waters of Alaska. South Africa, we've never really had any incidences concerning tankers, but there was a ship that went down carrying iron ore, and this spilled 24,000 tons of crude oil into Table Bay. Now that wasn't a tanker, okay, that was just a freight ship. So imagine if that were actually carrying oil. So that was just its petrol tank, its oil tank that spilled that 24,000, and that was a great deal of pollution that expelled from it. Okay, so let's continue. So in terms of pollution management, last section, guys, we're almost there. Okay. So in terms of reducing water pollution, we need to focus on non-point pollution measures in terms of covering cropland or open soil surfaces with vegetation in order to prevent erosion. And this is kind of an easy thing to do, although it's not really, because a lot of farmers will opt to use fast-growing alien species, and that doesn't help. And then also reducing the use of fertilizers, so that when the type of fertilizer we use has a slow release and not an instantaneous release. So this will make them last longer within a field, and also will prevent us using so much. And if they do get into the water, it doesn't contaminate it as quickly. And then also not using fertilizers on steeply sloped land. To be honest, we shouldn't be farming on steeply sloped land anyway, so that point is a bit weird. And then also we should be making use of sustainable practices such as reducing pesticide and herbicide use. Also just using organic products, products that are able to biodegrade and don't stay in the system for as long. Okay, and then also some other examples there of reducing water pollution, in which oil tankers now require double hull when they are out, and then also many countries are employing ocean cleanup schemes to filter out plastic water, although plastic out of water, although this will take a very long process. Okay, and then we have the National Resource Strategy. Okay, to be honest, this is just a tidbit of what the NWRS is actually. I want you to just read up a little bit more on it in the textbook in Fuel and Rabi, which I will be posting. And so the NWRS is part of requirements of the NWA, which in which the Water Act has set out objectives, and the NWRS is then the mechanism to realize these operational aspects of the Act, okay, in which these then include protecting and conserving our water resources, managing and controlling our use of it, and then also then developing infrastructure around the use of it to be as sustainably as possible, and then also lastly, most importantly, to monitor and report on our progress, because we can be saying all these things about how we're protecting it, how we're managing it, but if we're not monitoring it, we can't say, okay, we have improved since then or we have worsened since then. Okay, so the first resource strategy was released in 2004, and that sought to address various issues relating to water pollution and management. And the first step was to first outline the country and divide it into 19 water management agencies, or catchment management agencies as they're called now. And these catchment management agencies each then developed their own local strategy for managing water in their area, because obviously a place, a catchment, a CM. So in terms of legislative tools, the Act then set out two measures in order to protect the resource. So the resource in this sense is obviously our water. Okay, and so it then sought to approach it from a resource-directed approach and then also a source-directed approach. This is in terms of protecting it from water pollution. Okay, so resource-directed measures first entail defining the reserve. So the reserve is a very important thing to have because this is a portion of the water's national water fiscus, which is used for both for basic sanitation, and is also enough to maintain the ecological functioning of systems. So we can have enough water for ourselves, but we also need to make sure that there is enough water for the for nature, because if we collapse the system and only worry about ourselves, there will not be any water for us. So we need to ensure that there is enough water to still maintain the ecological functioning of ecosystems. Okay, so then also resource directed measures further entail classifying water resources as given by the National River Health Program in order to develop a baseline health status, and then from there we can then say, okay, these areas need to be protected, these areas are okay for development, they can withstand modification, so on and so forth, and then from there we create what's called a resource quality objective, which we receive this data, and then we create what are acceptable norms, and then this then is used by environmental managers for decision making. All right, guys, and that's it from me. Thank you so much for attending this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find it interesting. I've literally just realized now that I haven't I haven't scanned the textbook. So please just give me a little bit while that goes up. That will be up before 5 o'clock today. But yeah, please let me know if there are any questions. I am on the group. My number is on Blackboard, so is my email address. I do normally prefer emails, but I don't mind WhatsApps as long as it's within a reasonable hour. So far, I've had no issues, and I thank you guys for that. But please, if you need help, just shout. And once again, in terms of assessments, I have no idea what's going on there, but I'll let you know. And in terms of group work, I still need to talk to the faculty heads in terms of how that needs to be done. But just worry about the slides. Just worry about the readings that I give in terms of the textbooks. And tomorrow we'll be doing some prac work. And that'll probably just involve watching a video and just answering some just short questions. Okay, and I hope you guys have a lovely day and stay safe. Thank you so much again, and all the best. Goodbye.